The flames of war have reignited in the Middle East, and you could say that peace is hanging by a thread. So, is it really worth pursuing these peace talks? Today, Feng Wei will give you a detailed analysis on this topic. Also, on Tuesday, the New York primary brought about infighting within the Democratic Party. Could this even lead to a split in the future? That's another topic worth discussing today. All right, welcome to Good Morning America, brought to you by Feng Wei. Hello to all our YouTube viewers and greetings to everyone listening on Silicon Valley FM 96.1. Sorry about this. Today is Saturday and we usually do the show at 1:30 in the afternoon, but there have been some changes today. So Saturdays are basically a bit unpredictable, but no matter what, the goal is to update our viewers with the latest developments as soon as possible. That's the purpose of the show with Feng Wei. All right, let's get straight to the point and start with the latest news. In response to Iran attacking a Singaporean merchant ship, the United States launched airstrikes against Iran yesterday. Then Iran retaliated by attacking Bahrain, a Gulf country, and at the same time hit a large cruise ship. You could say that peace in the Middle East is hanging by a thread. I think you really have to look at the whole context of this situation to understand what's actually going on and what might happen next. Let's first rewind a few days. The United States and Iran actually had very good talks in Switzerland. They agreed on a high-level framework and then set up 3 working groups, plus 3 emergency mechanisms, including a direct phone line. In other words, if something happens, they'll talk first, address issues before they escalate to avoid accidents and ensure that the negotiations for safe passage can proceed smoothly and ultimately yield results. So what happened next? The Strait of Hormuz was opened and ships started passing through. Nearly 2 million barrels of oil are being shipped out every day, which led to a drop in global crude oil prices. The price of oil and gasoline in the United States has dropped significantly, and our American viewers have already noticed this. Then the negotiations continued, and everything seemed calm at first. But then something happened. Why did Iran suddenly attack that Singaporean merchant ship? In my opinion, and let me just add a quick comment here, I think Iran just can't stand seeing the strait running smoothly. They feel like they can't get a grip on the world's throat, so they launched this attack. They sent out 4 one-way drones to attack merchant ships passing through the strait. Actually, it wasn't just the Singaporean ship. They targeted 4 ships in total. But the US intercepted 3 of the drones. One of them wasn't seen. Not that it wasn't intercepted, just that it wasn't spotted. As President Trump said, it's not that it wasn't intercepted. The interception didn't happen because they didn't see it, so the drone ended up hitting a Singaporean merchant ship that was hugging the Omani side of the strait, coming in from outside the Gulf. Right now, everyone is staying away from the Iranian side of the shipping lane and taking the Omani route instead. As a result, Iran was the first to issue a warning, demanding that passing merchant ships use their route. Honestly, that's pretty helpless, isn't it? I mean, if you're always attacking people, of course they're going to keep their distance from you. Then you go and issue a warning demanding everyone come closer to you? So will people listen? Of course not. They just steer clear and take routes far away from Iran's shipping lanes. So then they just launch drones to carry out strikes. That's basically their excuse. Of course, they have their own reasons too, which I'll talk about in a bit. So what was the result of this? The incident happened on Friday, and because of it, the number of ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz dropped from 70 cruise ships or merchant vessels per day on Wednesday to just 54 on Thursday. So what happened after the attack on Friday? The traffic slowed down even further, with only 15 ships passing through. President Trump called Iran's attack an obvious and foolish violation of our ceasefire agreement. When asked whether Iran would face any consequences, President Trump said on Friday, "You'll see." Right after he said that, immediately after he finished speaking, the US military immediately took action in retaliation. Yesterday, they deployed 6 fighter jets to strike missile launch sites along the coast of the Strait of Hormuz, as well as drone storage facilities and coastal radar stations. Then Iran struck back, launching a massive attack on Gulf countries, especially Bahrain. The reason is that Bahrain is home to the headquarters of the US Fifth Fleet, so they sent a number of drones, a large number of drones, to attack Bahrain. This triggered condemnation from both Bahrain and Kuwait. In addition, a giant oil tanker that was loaded with oil in Qatar and heading to a port in the UAE was also hit. It was struck on the bridge. Fortunately, there were no casualties. So moving forward, it became a back and forth between both sides, with each side attacking the other. Now that an attack has already happened, will the United States not retaliate? That's the situation going forward. So here's the question. Where is the communication mechanism? Wasn't this discussed in Switzerland, right? There's what's called a triple communication mechanism. The first layer is The first is to communicate about possible conflicts between Hezbollah and Lebanon and the Israeli Defense Forces. Another is the conflict in the Gulf that we just mentioned. And then, behind the scenes, there's something called a coordination center. In short, how is this communication mechanism actually used? Do you know what Vice President Pence said about this during Trump's administration? He said that Iran had signed a ceasefire agreement, and we have already abided by it. If they have different ideas about how to implement the Memorandum of Understanding, they can just pick up the phone and call. But instead, they used violence. They chose violence. So Pence replied with 6 words. In English, these 6 words are, violence will be met with violence. In other words, if you use force, then we will respond with force. So how did Iran respond? How did they explain this incident? Well, Iran's supreme leader's military advisor, the former commander of the Revolutionary Guard named Rezai, said, these are his exact words, the United States, through supporting the actions of its proxy forces in the region, has violated the first article of the Memorandum of Understanding. By continuing to create tensions in the Strait of Hormuz, they have violated Article 5. Any response to violations of any terms of the Memorandum of Understanding will be swift and decisive. It seems like he has plenty of reasons, doesn't it? Let's take a look at what Article 1 is. Article 1 states that the United States of America, along with Iran and its allies in the current war, by signing the Memorandum of Understanding, declare the immediate and permanent cessation of all military actions on all fronts, including in Lebanon. Okay, that's Article 1. Now, Article 5 is that Iran will make its best efforts to arrange, within 60 days, for safe passage of commercial vessels from the Persian Gulf to the Sea of Oman and vice versa, and will not charge any fees. This is Article 5. So obviously Article 1 is basically blaming the United States for not restraining Israel, right? But you could say that's a bit of a stretch, don't you think? Because Israel didn't even sign it. The US signed it. Can the US really control Israel? Besides, would Israel just attack Hezbollah for no reason? Most of the time, it's Hezbollah attacking Israel first, and then Israel retaliates, right? But anyway, the main point is that Israel didn't even sign it in the first place. Blaming the US for not restraining Israel is a stretch. Article 5 simply requires Iran to keep the strait open and fee-free. Yet, Iran claims the US violated both articles. So basically, this is just sophistry. It's really just rogue behavior. So what's the current situation now? After both sides started fighting, in my view, this is basically what's happening. That's why I say Iran can't stand to see oil prices drop and the world breathing easy. Just because of this, they're looking to stir up trouble. So right now, in and around the Persian Gulf, inside and outside the strait, there are currently 25 U.S. warships stationed there, including 17 missile destroyers, 2 aircraft carrier strike groups, 50,000 U.S. troops, plus the Marine Corps, and even the U.S. Army's 82nd Airborne Division is over there. So in the face of such military power, daring to still show off hegemony in the strait, that really takes guts. Their nerve is truly something else. Frankly, they're asking for trouble. Iran is courting disaster. If the US attacks and Iran strikes the Gulf, it's the same old story. So what's the way forward? Is there still a path to peace? If you ask me, I'd say I don't know. I really don't know. Right now, everything is basically the Trump administration trying to give peace a chance. That's why they've gone to such great lengths, making this agreement, so many MOUs, and even arranging such a long ceasefire. The Trump administration just wants to show the greatest goodwill. Because the Trump administration really doesn't want to get bogged down in a prolonged conflict there. And at the same time, they want to show the greatest goodwill. But if Iran keeps stirring things up like this, then honestly, they're just asking for trouble. So as for this whole peace process, this is how I see it. Well, it's still worth it in itself. If peace succeeds, that's great. It means the world is free from the current threat. And in the long run, it's not on Iran's side. That's a good thing. If peace doesn't succeed, that's also a good thing. For people like Vance and for Trump, President Trump and Vice President Vance, for them, it's a good education. They'll learn, oh, so this is how you deal with an evil regime. So sometimes you just have to take some detours because the process of going through them is a process of learning. So whether it's dealing with Iran or the Chinese Communist Party, I think the Trump administration is going through a learning process. Like I've said many times, to put it plainly, this is a civilian government that came about in response to America's domestic political needs. This government was born out of that necessity. As for how to deal with regimes like the Chinese Communist Party or Iran, these abnormal countries, these rogue states, Well, just look at their previous actions. Iran is so overbearing. Even when ships try to avoid them by staying far away, they still threaten them and force them to pass through their area. In the end, when others refuse to go through, you still send drones to attack them. Then, when the US punishes Iran, Iran retaliates by attacking someone else. It's like Zhang San hits Iran, Iran does something again, and then they twist the facts, claiming that the US not only violated Article 1, but also Article 5. Article 5 says you have to keep the strait open. They say the US violated Article 5, so that's basically the process. These abnormal countries just don't play by normal logic at all, and there's absolutely no integrity to speak of. It's not even about the country anymore, it's about these regimes. So, what should the US do? What should the Trump administration do? So, I think sometimes this is actually a valuable learning experience. Alright, let's just wait and see what happens. What do y'all think? If you could give one piece of advice to the US government, what would it be? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. By the way, yesterday Trump gave a speech at the Faith and Freedom Forum. It was 47 minutes long. I listened to the whole thing, and I think what he said is really worth paying attention to, especially since on Tuesday, the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, after their big win in New York, President Trump said that the biggest threat facing America is the rise of communism in the United States. So Trump made 3 points. The first point was that being a communist or a member of the Communist Party is actually the easiest thing to do. He said, I could be the best communist because let me tell you, all you have to do is make everything free. Free housing, free food. Transportation would be free too. Everything would be free. Absolutely everything. If everything is free, everyone would vote for me. So being a communist is the easiest thing to do. But after 2 or 3 years, the country would be finished. The whole nation would be swarming with flies. So that's why Trump said this. People would end up living in filth and poverty with nothing to eat and nowhere to live. The country wouldn't have an army or anything at all. America would become a third world country and everyone would suffer or even face death. Trump said, I'm sorry to put it this way, but for communists, assassinating those who oppose them is a key part of their ideology. They are animals, he said. They are beasts. In many cases, President Trump said, they aren't smart, but in some cases, they are smart. They can easily find followers because they know how to make promises they can't keep. They just sell promises to others. For example, he mentioned that recently in New York, Mayor Adams just issued an order regarding all rental housing. Rent cannot be increased. It's called 0%. For 2 years, rent is frozen and cannot go up. As everyone knows, right now, gas prices are rising, energy costs are increasing, and inflation is happening in all aspects. This is a normal phenomenon in today's Western society. So if the Federal Reserve does its best, well, not the Federal Reserve, but if the Federal Reserve does its best, what would that be? It's to keep it at 2% per year, right? Now, if it's still above 2% and you don't allow landlords to raise the rent, that means the properties they rent out will lose money, right? Because after losing profit, you still can't raise the rent, right? If costs go up, but income doesn't, you'll lose money. So what does that lead to? First, developers won't come to fix up houses anymore since there's no money to be made. Second, people who are already renting out their houses will take them back. The owners will reclaim them because if they're going to lose money, they'd rather just live there themselves, right? Third, housing prices will skyrocket, but the government says they can't go up. What happens if the director has nowhere to live? One thing is bound to happen, a black market will emerge. This is a classic example. During the French Revolution, when France was going through its revolution, it was that kind of thing, what you could call a pre-communist era, led by people like the communists, and they brought about the French Revolution. They rose up in rebellion to overthrow me, to overthrow the monarchy. The French Revolution was a revolution without faith, you could say, a revolution that killed countless people. At that time, the prices of basic necessities in France, like eggs, milk, and bread, skyrocketed. So revolutionary leaders ordered a price freeze, no raising prices on eggs, milk, or bread. If prices rose, you'd face arrest, jail, or even execution. The result? It created a black market, and prices for basic goods soared even higher. Prices soared on the black market, and you couldn't buy anything on the open market. Everything ended up on the black market. This is the so-called genius idea of price controls, and this is the result. So as Trump said, he wasn't wrong. Being a communist is just too easy. You don't have to produce anything. You don't have to invent or create anything. Managing the economy just means giving orders. If prices are too high, just forbid them from going up. So then what? What's the result? The result is exactly what we just described. That's why the free market is actually what really solves these kinds of problems. If prices go up, so what? Let them rise. As soon as prices go up, developers jump in, more and more houses get built, and then prices come down, right? So the free market can solve these problems on its own, and the mechanism it uses is very, very graceful, truly elegant. It's very, what do you call it? Very thorough, very harmless. This kind of common sense, so many Americans today just don't know it. All right, so the first thing President Trump said is that communism is on the rise in America. And it's also very easy for communists to make the second point. He said communism is the greatest threat to America, and the Democratic Party doesn't resist it. President Trump said that the Democrats don't fight back. In many ways, they actually allow, you could say, infiltration into the Democratic Party, letting them do whatever they want. You all know what the DSA is, right? The DSA is a very old party, founded in 1982, and when it was first established, it only had 6,000 members. Okay, so for the first 30 years, there was no progress at all. It was just a tiny party, barely noticeable. But in 2016, well, actually starting in 2014, they began supporting Bernie Sanders. In 2016, when Bernie Sanders ran for the Democratic presidential nomination, their membership increased significantly. Then, after Trump took office for his first term, a lot of anti-Trump people joined the DSA. As a result, by 2021, the number of DSA members reached a record high. 90,000 people. But later on, internal conflicts started again. Should they be anti-Israel or not? Should they stay independent and form a third party or remain within the Democratic Party? There were all kinds of different opinions, and people started fighting internally, just like what happens in the Communist Party. But the Chinese Communist Party is known for its intense internal struggles, class struggles, and ideological battles. As a result, after all the infighting, their numbers dropped to just 40,000. Then after Mindani was elected mayor, and after Trump was elected president, some young people went back in, and now their numbers have recovered to 90,000, almost 100,000. So what does 100,000 people mean? 100,000 means that among the socialist or communist parties in the United States, they are already the largest. The second largest communist party in the US only has about 20,000 members. Some even say they only have 1,500 because all these numbers are self-reported. Other small parties, like the ones you see on the streets in New York holding banners, this one is called the Revolutionary Communist Party, or RCP of America, they only have about 1,000 members in total. Ignore their street noise. They're just 1,000 people. The DSA is the largest US socialist group, with 100,000 members. But compare that to the Democrats, who have 30 to 40 million. So it's really just a tiny thing, like a sesame seed or a mung bean. So what was the result of their conflict in the end? After Mandani was elected mayor, their membership didn't double to become the 100,000 it is today. Like I just mentioned, after all their discussions, they finally came to a conclusion. We need to stay inside the Democratic Party. Just like I told you before, it's like a cuckoo laying its eggs in another bird's nest, taking over. So in this situation, what can the Democratic Party do? President Trump said, "These Democrats are afraid of losing elections, and they're also afraid of conflict. They're not smart enough nor tough enough to fight against this plague infecting the Democratic Party. Out of 30 million Democrats, now there's this small party of 100,000 coming in to dig out your heart and lungs, and they don't dare touch them." Trump said if they fought against them the way they fight against Republicans or the way they fight against me, they would beat these communists. Trump said it directly about them. He said, "These people are not Social Democrats, they are hardcore atheistic communists." He said, "This is the most serious threat to our country in the 250 years since our nation was founded." But he said that the Democrats now lack the courage. They don't have the courage to stand up to them. Third, President Trump said that religion is the greatest enemy of communism because people with faith won't submit. They have their own values and they will confront communism head on. So conversely, communism and the Communist Party are definitely anti-religion and want to wipe out religion. Therefore, he said religion is America's first right. Freedom of religion is America's #1 right. In this regard, I really think everyone knows Trump is a Christian, right? American Christians, ever since the founding of the country, have never tried to make Christianity the state religion, and in fact, they've been very cautious about that. So religious belief in America is truly about genuine religious faith. You can believe in whatever you want, right? But of course, President Trump will promote his Christianity, and that's totally understandable, isn't it? But still, it's true. America's religious freedom is real religious freedom. All right, then President Trump went on to say, isn't this ironic? We're celebrating a very important birthday for this country. We're not talking about Christ, about freedom, or about all the victories this country's achieved. Instead, we're talking about yet another threat to the very foundation of this nation. Yes, that's right. This is what's happening right now with the New York primary. As a result, young people in America are being promised free stuff by someone. Freezing rent, free public transportation, free childcare, and so on, free groceries or low priced groceries. They end up casting their votes for the greatest threat to America. So now the left in America is on the rise, you could say. That's just how it is. So, what about the Democratic Party now? Although they haven't made any public statements these past few days, the Democratic Party is actually very nervous internally. So, there have already been changes within the party. 13 Democratic members of the House and candidates have already signed something called the Commitment to America. Yes, this is a new centrist initiative called Promise to America. As you can see, yes, our editor posted it very well. It's clearly stated, how do they put it? We are capitalists. We are not socialists. We call for policies that ensure border security, not open borders, fiscal responsibility, not reckless spending, and national pride, not hating America. These are the commitments. The full text outlines 6 basic principles. What are they? Let me share them with you. So first, the loudest slogan is that we are capitalists, not socialists. We want to build an economic system that rewards hard work, lowers costs, and expands opportunities. We want safety, not lawlessness. We support secure borders, orderly immigration, and safe communities. We adhere to fiscal discipline. We are responsible, not reckless. We demand efficient government. We demand freedom of speech, and we demand moderation. We are the mainstream, not the extremists. We are confident patriots. We are proud of America, not ashamed of it.